go ahead on through that. So we're looking for, first of all, it depends on the assumption. Is this a necessary or sufficient assumption question?
Necessary.
Yep. And so what is it going to be for a necessary assumption question? What are we looking for?
Um, the debate the coach's argument depends on the assumption that, like, I guess the assumption that is needed to prove the coach's argument.
Yeah, like for necessary assumption questions in general, we're looking for something that the conclusion cannot be true without.
Hmm.
It doesn't necessarily mean that the conclusion must be true. Like for sufficient assumption ones, the answer choice we pick guarantees that the conclusion is true. Like they'll usually be worded like logically follows kind of thing. So when we pick a sufficient assumption one, well, we know that the conclusion will then, it has to be true. It is a logical like conclusion. Necessary assumption, we just require that if we aren't allowed to assume it, it can't be true. That's the biggest difference there. All right. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be true. So I'll give you a chance to go ahead and read through. Let me know when you've done so.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So do you
My
see any
my
gap here? Yeah.
yeah, I was just gonna say, my initial thoughts were, or at least like an assumption that I have is that this is assuming that Robert's argument um was more reasonable than Britta's.
And why do we need that assumption?
Well, the argument follows, or it goes, the structure kind of, it's like, it shows that Britta's command of the historical facts was better than Robert's, and
hmm
that led to the distinct impression that Britta won the debate.
hmm
So, okay. And then it says it's also important to evaluate how reasonable the debaters' arguments were, regardless of their ability to bring facts to bear on those arguments. So, when you take that into consideration, Robert's debate performance was as good as Britta's. So, first it says Britta's command of the facts were better. And then it says that gives you the impression that Britta won the debate. However, you should evaluate. However, it's also important to evaluate the debater, how reasonable the debater's arguments were,
Yeah.
regardless of their. Yeah, sorry.
No
um,
worries. You got the right assumption there. That is what we end up needing. Because if it's like just very simply put, if Robert's arguments weren't more reasonable than Britta's, then why would Robert's debate performance be as good? We know
yeah,
Britta's command was better, but we don't know anything about anything that brings Robert up. So usually we would go through all of these. What's the right answer here?
B.
Yeah. Like very simply, if we have a good prediction, it makes all like we don't even really have to go through the rest of these because they don't add much to it. Because yeah, we have B very easily and quickly from that. All right.